Hi, I'm William, and you're watching Foil Driven. In this episode, I'm going to get into downwinding with a foil drive. So let's start by talking about the different ways you can foil drive, or you can downwind with a foil drive. You can do the traditional way, which is one of these big boards behind me. It's roughly 110 liters, 8 foot long, about 20 inches wide. So it's long and it's narrow. And what that does, it gets you off the water pretty quickly. It doesn't take a whole lot of paddling, or if you're using a wing, it doesn't take a whole lot of wind. But we don't really need that if we have a motor. And so I'm going to get into why you would use one of these big boards behind me with a foil drive, or whether you just skip it and go with a 30 or 44 liter, somewhere around that range, a sinker board. I think each has its merits, but in the end, it's going to be up to you on what you want to get out of this. Let's start off with the traditional large, long, narrow board like I have behind me. So let's talk about what's fun about it, because I mean that's really how I approach this. I'm not a competitor. I'm a content creator. So when I'm sizing out equipment, it's going to be about how much fun I can have and what's it going to add to my day, rather than how am I going to beat somebody in a performance in a contest. So for those of you who are looking to build skills, there is some of that for you. I think if you use a foil drive, you'll spend a lot less time paddling up and working on some of the basic skills once you're up. And I think there's something to be said about that. I think there's something about occasionally, when the day is right and the conditions are right, skipping all that frustration on the water first and getting to, pumping with one of these big things, doing your bump hunts, trying to find the best swell and staying in it, without worrying about if you're going to come off a foil, because you lose so much time when you come off a foil. So if you're a competitor, this is a way to maybe sharpen your skills. You're still going to have to go and learn how to, paddle up in flat water, paddle up in the waves very quickly if you want to compete. But I think you can learn some of your basic skills. You can get to them quicker on the days that count. So instead of wasting your time when it's really perfect conditions for downwinding trying to get on foil, you can actually start working on those skills that are going to help you win the race, or whatever your aim is. That's not my case. That's not why I do it. I'm doing it for fun. And so I think the number one thing I liked about it was, with this foil or this board, I can get smaller foils up very easily where I might struggle. So I can kind of test out different foils. They're small, figure out how they ride. They ride a little bit different on this big board, but I think that's an advantage. And they're fun, of course. Using a paddle. This is, sure, you could use it with any board, but it's right at home with one of these downwind boards. So I was spending a lot of time prone surfing. One of the smaller ones, it was about 7 foot by 18 wide, which meant there was no way in hell I was going to paddle that up in flat water, but I had the foil drive, so it comes up quick. In the surf, it was just long enough at 7 foot to feel fun, but not so long that it was getting in the way of the waves. So I had a lot of fun with that, and I think you can too. If you wind up buying one of these things, try them out in say unconventional ways, like taking it out in the surf, because they're a lot of fun. Playing with that paddle, just going into heavy carbs and laying the paddle down so that you have something to sort of counter your balance. It's a lot of fun. So you can kind of go into deeper carbs with these big boards. That I had a lot of fun with that. I had a lot of fun taking this big board into the flats and working on my pumping, because everything is so exaggerated with this board. I mean, it had 8 foot long. The access board I got behind me, it's 8 foot long. And so when you go to pump that, you can see the nose, if you're not pumping with 100% efficiency, you can see the nose wagging too much. And so you can kind of work on that, work on making your pump more efficient. You can say, like I do, you can video it and go back and see how poorly you're pumping, and then work on those things the long board sort of exaggerates all the motion, so you can see, whatever mistakes you're making. And it's a great tool for that. It's a great tool for learning, say, deep carves, because if you can carve this big board, then when you go back down to a smaller board, it just feels a little bit easier. And same thing went from when I went from riding, the 8-foot board, and I went to my 30-liter board. Oh, it just brings the smallness factor back to it. Because if you're riding a 30-liter all the time, it can wind up feeling normal again. It won't feel as small as it did when you first started riding it. And switching up to something 8 foot long will exaggerate how small it is again and make it feel, make the small boards feel fun again in the waves. So going back and forth between the two of them, it's going to build a little skills, because you're going to have to use different techniques to use each one of them, but they cross over. I think the skills they're foundational skills. So what you're learning to maneuver an 8-foot board really goes to help out in the surf. I could see my surf improving going back and forth between the two. So you're going to go on your first downwinder, and you've got to choose between a giant board like I got behind me, or say a small sinker board. And I think another factor that helps with these large boards is if something happens and you have to paddle in by hand or with your paddle or whatever it is, you just have a little bit more safety. There's a lot more foam there to help you get back to shore. Whereas if you're on a 30-liter and something goes wrong, it's a brutal paddle back in. So let's talk about safety. If you're going a little bit far off the shore, 30 liters is really difficult. It's not impossible, but it's difficult to paddle back in. Whereas if you have a 110-liter board and you actually have a paddle, if something goes wrong, you can paddle back in. Well, most people can paddle back in with a lot less effort. I'll go with this. I might keep a downwind board around because, honestly, it does a lot in the flats to help me out when I'm practicing for what I'm going to do out in the waves. It just helps me build skills. So your pumping is a little bit more difficult on a big board, so your technique has got to be much better. And so I might use it like you'd use ankle weights. And I'll use the paddle just when I'm bored and I want something different. I think that's a good setup. I ride every day, so occasionally when it's a bunch of flat days in a row, it's nice to have something that's a little different to kind of mix it up. So I think that's where I'm going to be. Thanks again to Fin and Foil for loaning me this board. I certainly couldn't have made this content without your help. Thanks to Access and, of course, Foil Drive. If you haven't, please like and subscribe.